but it's not rocket science. Even at high levels, there's 5 pillars. And the 5 pillars are, you need to get in front of the audience that is most likely to need the products and services and solutions that you have. So you need to clearly identify that. And a lot of businesses find it very difficult to do that because they're so ready for business. They want business. So anybody with a checkbook and at a pulse, and you very often hear people at marketing, at online meetings and network meetings saying anybody and somebody. The more focused you are, the clearer you are in seeing that person, and the more they will come into your site and you'll reach them. And the more you'll be able to help other people reach them. Then, of course, you've got to get them to lean in and build a relationship. And that's the engagement bit. And we're going to be talking about that and how we do that in a moment. That really must be, any engagement must ultimately lead to a sale. In many cases, it doesn't, and that doesn't matter because the right people will come to you at the right time. And timing with the sale is as much to do with anything. As Anne-Marie has found out, because she was almost giving up on well, I don't know whether you were almost giving up, but it's easy to give up with people that are not responding when you expect them or you need them to respond. And of course, after the sale, it's making sure we retain those clients by what we do afterwards. And then, of course, the introductions are really key. And that's when you know how to ask people, how to educate people on the audience you're looking to get into. So remember, the people on this call are not your audience, and that is a really key thing I want to get over. Now, if we're talking about audience to sales, one fact that came to me some years ago, and I wish I'd have known it years and years before, but it was done quite naturally. 87% of all sales take place after the 7th touch. I think the same is probably for referrals. Now, there's no statistical basis for that about referrals, but this was some research done in America for in the sales community. And if 87% of sales took place after the 7th touch, when they analysed salespeople, what they also said is most people give up after the 1st or 2nd touch. In fact, over half of people have given up by that stage. So what does that teach us? It teaches, Damien.
Follow-up is the hardest thing in the world, and we always make the same mistakes because we get busy, and sometimes we allow things to get into our subconscious that we don't want to bother someone. And actually going to a client with something new and nurturing them through the process of thought and spending the time to do that is often the thing that we just let go. And it's so difficult. I find myself doing it all the time. It's just a tough one.
I agree with you. I think whenever I've talked about this, everybody agrees with it. But we've got to remember that for most of us on this call, it's like the guy with the plates, and you get a plate in the air because you're focused on it and it's really moving. You think that's moving all right. So then you've got you've got all these plates in there, all the different things we've got to think about. And then we're getting success here, but we've just realized that there's a plate wobbling and it's the prospecting plate. And there's another one there because you've got this list of people that you've collected and you've not been in touch with them. And then you go to that and then it's difficult. It is. So you're spot on there, Damien. So
that's why it's important to that's why it's important to almost lay out a process. I know it sometimes thinks really stupid, but actually, if you think about all the things that you do as a job, as work, often the client doesn't know the total entirety of all the things that you do. And one of the things for a prospect, and I'm going to use a word which I'm sure Paul will jump on, is if you've got a lead magnet and you capture some information, how do you nurture and pull them towards you rather than push them, pull them towards you with all the things that you've got? One of the things I spend a lot of time on is actually laying out the automation of the journey before someone joins you, and answering all the questions that someone would ask that would become objections later. So you're just removing them all away. Sorry, Paul.
No, that's all right. You've actually just said what I was about to say, but Anne-Marie had a point as well.
Oh, it was more a question actually on the 7th touch, which you said, and I appreciate you talking about the sale. Sorry, excuse me. So I've got a particular client who I met at a networking, and she was very much, she kind of came to me, I want to meet you, blah, 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 blah. So we set up a one-to-one. She didn't turn up for the one-to-one. So I sent her an email saying, oh, sorry to have missed you, hope everything's okay. No reply. And then I sent an email the following week, exactly the same, saying, you know, really sorry to have missed you, hope everything's all right, did you still want to meet? No reply. I saw her at another networking group and I messaged her in the chat and just said, oh, did you want to make another appointment? And nothing. So obviously that's, what's that, 3-4 touches. But is it worth going back again? Or is it just because she hasn't even had the courtesy to say, sorry, I didn't turn up?
So I want to come back to what Damien said there. I think there's lots of reasons, first of all, why people don't respond, why 82% of sales take place after the 7 touch. First of all, they're busy with other things. You may have interrupted their day, their week, etc., in the way that you've prospected. Secondly, they don't know, they don't necessarily trust you. You seem like a nice person, but they don't know that. They don't know whether you're competent. They don't even know whether they need your service, because maybe it's a more of an involved service. I mean, certainly in Anne-Marie's case, it's a little bit off. It's a bit more unusual. It's not like an electrician or whatever. And so all of these things, or it could be they don't have the money for the investment. There's lots of different reasons. So it's very important to stay in touch. But as Damien has said, we don't generally have a process, a system to stay in touch. An email is a very, very good system if you can get the right system. I'm just going to read one or two facts out here, which might be useful, because I think email is by the way, there's different ways of staying in touch, but email is one of them. LinkedIn, I know, is a favorite for a lot of people, but it's not as easy to systemize that, or I haven't found it as easy. I suppose if you went onto Sales Navigator, not sure Facebook is an easy one. You generally want to, if somebody's made an inquiry, get them to PM you, and then you take them offline. But how does everybody else stay in touch? That's the question. And it's a question that needs to be solved if you're going to generate the business that you need to generate. Rod?
Yeah, I think the thing is that we have to appreciate that dealing from a position of strength when you're a business is the way forward. Don't be scrabbling around after people. Don't let them think you're desperate, or they will. And my position is that I appear on the market once a week. I take a lead. I know every time I take a name, address, and details, and I write to them and send them an information pack, that only one of the 3 are ready to move forward at that time. The other 2 still are interested, but not really ready yet. And so you have to put them into a forward diary and explain to them that the only reason you're ringing them up, when you're ringing someone over 60, over 70, over 80, you're in a delicate situation. But in any case, in any situation for any of us, we are in a delicate situation. They don't know us. As Paul said, all those reasons why we should be dealing from position of strength and ensuring that we follow through in a professional manner. So I will ring, I will email if I've got the email address, I will text, I will message, but I will also put pen to paper. Well, not pen to paper, literally, but I'll type them up a letter on headed paper. So I didn't manage to get hold of you. However, if you're still interested, give me a shout. If not, I'll come back to you in 3 or 4 months' time. And that's how I do it. I'm steady about it, and I don't want to put pressure on them. And
do you go back to them in 3 or 4 months' time?
I certainly do. Yeah.
Right. So that's
that 3 or 4 months' time, I start with another letter. Bearing in mind we're dealing with a different age group with me, but if I had their email address, it would be the same as a letter. And then I'll ring them. I'm going to ring you next week.
And I know you do those things, and that is a very good point. There's not one way in which we can communicate with people. You've got to find the most appropriate way for them. But I wish you wouldn't keep saying it's difficult to talk to 70-year-olds and people that are over 70.
No, you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful with them.
Oh, right.
It's not difficult. It's just that they need to be, obviously from the other point of view, if their son or daughter or friend would look at you as, trying to push them into something. And you know me, the last thing I want to do is for anybody to buy something they don't want. And in fact, I always test and measure their affordability. So they can't afford it, they don't get it from me anyway.
Anne-Marie.
Sorry, Rod, can I just clarify? Presumably you're talking about funeral plans you're selling, because presumably if you're dead, then you're ready for a funeral.
Yeah, I'm talking about funeral plans. Yeah.
I was just getting a bit confused. I was thinking, okay.
If you're dead, they're not going to answer the phone.
No, that's right. They tend not to speak.
No, I was just struggling to see where there was a pipeline with dead people.
Yeah.
Nick,
No,
Nick,
I've got no message to the dead. I can assure you. None whatsoever.
hey, there could be a market there, Rod. There's a lot of people leaving there.
Yeah, maybe it's a hocus pocus one, eh?
There's a product there. Nick.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull out one thing that Roger said there actually in that kind of chat, which was he doesn't like putting pressure on people, or don't put pressure on people. And I think that's really important. I think if I think about how I like people to treat me, if someone's really salesy to me or desperate or pushy, I kind of get my shackles off and it pushes me back. So I think it's trying to add the value without kind of constantly chasing someone. Where's the deal? Where's the deal? How can we close this? People don't respond to that, I don't think.
I don't think that when
really
it says
difficult.
when you say 82% of sales take place after the 7th touch, it's not 7 sales prospects, sales pitches. And we shouldn't, if somebody thinks it's a sales pitch, it's a sales pitch.
Yeah.
They shouldn't think it, I said to one person recently, you've got to learn to sell with your ears. So you've got to put yourself in their position, and you've got to ask, and you just got to be curious about where you're up to, where they're up to, what's happening in their life, etc. Damien, you had a point.
Yeah, what's interesting when someone says, I get this a lot because of what I do. And what I do is I build massive automation systems for companies that are constantly going back to the prospect, and they go, I don't want to be pressured, we don't want to sell. And I always trying to say that actually, at the end of the day, people will buy any length of time. And if you don't capture everybody and you only just deal with this bit, you'll miss with all these people who then build trust in you. So if you don't keep communicating the successes of what you do, the stories about how you've done things that have helped, the lessons, most importantly, that others have learned that you share for free with others, you won't build the trust in what you do. And so often some people think, oh, I don't want to give too much stuff because I don't want to pressure them into buying. Well, I think in a world now where it's content rich, it's the content that rises to the top because it's got the wins in it that you should be shouting from the rafters about and telling lots of people about. And, even if it's 25 communications before someone calls you 6 months after capturing that piece of data, it's something you didn't lose because you've got a short-term focus. And that's all I wanted to say.
No, timing is as much to do with the decisions we make as anything. And most people, if the competitors are giving up after the first or second touch, when they haven't even had the chance to build a relationship, yet you've done that, you're going to start winning. If the sale is 7 touches away, what are you going to do to stay around for that 7th touch? That's the message I want to get.
Yeah, I mean, just covering off what you said about the 7 touches, with me, it's about right place, right time. Because when it's about the email arriving when my prospect has a problem or a need for my services. As you say, first contact they might not have, second contact again might not have, but it's about hitting them with that email. And I do a rolling program of emails with alternative subject lines and alternative content, but it's going to the same people, but I just refresh it. The offers are similar, if not the same, but I'll just make sure that, I don't give up, and it's a rolling program.
And he's adding value. I think that is the key thing that Damien's just brought out as well. Andrew.
Yeah, just to say something that you said a while back, Paul, which just really stuck in my head, and this really just goes to what everyone's saying at the moment, goes to show this. No doesn't mean no forever. No is no right now. And like Damien's saying as well, if you're keeping in touch, that constant touch point, you're in people's minds. And when that no becomes a yes, because they already for that service, you're in their mind. And that's really lodged in my head, actually. So I think that's a great way to do it.
Well, that leads me to say that the method of staying in touch with people from a content point of view versus also using email from a prospecting point of view. And I use email for both. I use it. The campaign I'm doing for B&I will be a cold outreach.
there's a lot of stats around email marketing, massive amount. And I think one thing you must all remember is that spam is not a decision that you make. Spam is a decision that the end user decides is spam. So let's think about it. Everything is spam, and we're in a universe of spam. And really, it's looking at first what is your subject line. Is your subject line such? And in fact, actually, certain email providers will stop your information going out to spam if there are certain characters in it, if it says certain things, if there are pound signs, if there's words like COVID. You know, that is an understanding subject line, telling the story of that subject line. The other side of it is that, you know, if someone unsubscribes you or considers you as spam, you haven't got the message right and you're sending it to the wrong person. The other thing is, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't send anything to anybody. In fact, actually, you should send more often to everybody in order to keep your list that you've got really sharp. So, in fact, some people say, oh, we'll send it every other month. In fact, actually, you should be doing, you know, you should be sending communications at least once, you know, every couple of weeks about something new that is of interest in order to get your database clean, so you have a good open rate and you shift out all the rubbish that people consider you to spam. So that's what I was saying. There's a whole science behind spam, but actually no one can define spam better than you.
How many people are using email, Nick?
Well, I was just going to ask you, sorry, before you jump into that, are you buying an email list or are you creating it yourself through research?
Frankly, I am dead against buying lists, dead against it. And I know when Nick Sladek did a cover, he buys lists in, but he buys, first of all, he knows what he's doing. That's his main area of expertise. Secondly, he did say that he's got a trusted supplier, and maybe Mel can answer this, you know, because I know you've bought lists and it's been traditional to buy lists, but you've got to say to yourself, how up to date is that list?
Yeah, you're right. I've done both. I mean, I've currently created my own database where I've done my own research, and I've created a database of marketing and digital agencies because I know I've got full control of it then. In my former life, when I was at McCann Erickson and we were mailing financial services offers to our clients on things like equity release, then we'd buy in lists, but I used it through a very trustworthy list broker who I knew and trusted, and I knew that they'd been sort of edited down or verified on a regular basis. So both sides of the coin, really.
I suppose it depends on who your target is. If you're targeting financial companies or big industrial units, etc., where you're targeting CEOs, etc., that data can be quite useful. But I would imagine most people on this call, buying a list is a tricky thing. So that's all I would say to that. And
it's a nightmare. I mean, fortunately, we were looking at a niche market. So to be eligible for the equity release product, you had to meet certain criteria. So over a certain age, house of a certain value. So that brings it right down to a niche market, which is important.
So all you're basically saying is you know what your audience is, you've got the data to actually get in front of that audience. And I think nowadays, social media does that well, as provided you're prepared to pay for it, but then you pay for a list as well. And you can generally only use that list once, am I right?
Well, again, it depends. We were targeting prospects, you know, sometimes more than your 7 times. It's costly because you've got to use it again. But I mean, if you buy unlimited use, which will cost you more, then that's what I was targeting.
Yeah. Andrew.
Yeah, so just you guys chatting about this reminded me that I read an interesting article a little while back from MailChimp, who, you know, they know a few things about this type of thing, about some of the sort of rookie mistakes really that people make with this stuff. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same article that I read, but I've just gone and found one of their articles on this and popped it in the chat. So if you want to look at that, that's some really great information on there. Sort of a quick scan through. I'd urge people to read that.
I think if you also put it on the membership site, put it on as a post with a link to that, that would be useful as well. And Marie.
Yes, so sorry, I was just going to go back to this cold, I forget how you referred to it, cold outreach comment that you made. I might be being a bit thick, but I don't really understand what that means if you're not talking about buying a list.
A cold outreach is reaching out to people that you don't know. And you've got a good point there. People you don't know, to sort of find out. You're fishing to see whether what you have might be of interest to them. That could be collating a list by going onto Google and copying down email addresses, etc. Could be, I mean, let's face it, if you want, it's not as easy. I think it's more to do with B2B, because Google won't give you contact details of individuals. They'll only give you details of businesses. I use a piece of software for my campaigns for people. And I can tell you where that, I'll give you a link to that software. And in fact, I think on a previous call, I've showed you how it works. It's called Leads Gorilla. I think it's about $47. I bought it and I made quite a lot of money out of that. I use it on all campaigns, but it's how you use it that is very clever. And what Leads Gorilla does is it essentially will go onto Google and it will scrape details of each of the accounts that are on Google. So let me cover the spam element, if I may. If I want to reach out to photographers, and I think this, I'm almost sure Rebecca came as a result of a campaign I was doing for BNI. And I know Sarah Lay, that was on one of our calls, was so impressed with the email I sent and the follow-up that she ended up coming on this call. And she reached out and said how impressed it was. So if you're doing a cold outreach, a cold email, you need to be able to decide who you're going to ring, who you're going to email, and gather that information. And I find Leads Gorilla does that. You basically can say, right, I want to speak to photographers, landscape gardeners, financial planners, accountants in an area of 10 miles around my postcode in Bristol, 20 miles or whatever. And what it will do is you click the button and it will then go on to Google very fast. And it will pull all that data down. And then you might say, do it again. And it'll pull more data down. And I can get out of each of those categories, 20, 25 people easily. Now, and I also ask it, only give me details where they've got an email. And it not only does it pull that down, but it pulls all sorts of data on those accounts as far as social media is concerned, whether they've got Google Places whether they've done their Google Places, how their website's ranking, does all of that. So it's very useful for web designers and digital people. Now, when I've got that, I pull it into my system called One CRM. And the benefit of that is as I pull it in, as it's pulled in that data, it pulls off any social media contacts that they've got, LinkedIn, Facebook. So I've got a lot of data using those two. I then will send out an email that is non-spammy, that does not attempt to sell anything. And I haven't got the time to show you the sort of things I show, but maybe that's an example which, if anybody's interested, I could show you. It's got, as Damien said, it's got a very good email headline to get them to open it. And it's got a very non-threatening, non-salesy, conversational email to say, we're doing this at the moment. I don't know whether you're in a position to, or whether this is of any interest to, but if you are, I can email you details, or I can give you a call. Which would you prefer? And all I'm looking for is a reply, because when I've got the reply, they'll give me their name and any other data I might. Because when you're using this approach, you don't have somebody's name. I could get the list and go on all of those websites and find a name, but even so, very often people don't have the name on the website. Now, why is that ethical? Well, if you've got an email address on your website, it means you want people to call you. You're inviting people to call. Now, you don't want somebody trying to sell you stuff blind, but you're not doing that. You're just reaching out to say, thinking of doing this, could this be of any interest to you? And I'll get the occasional person will say, no, I'm not interested, because they think I'm selling something. I am, I suppose. Take me off the list. And I politely write back and say, actually, you're not on a list. It was a genuine call, but take care. And so I'm polite on that. I get very few of those. Most people say, give me a call. This sounds interesting. Can you send me information? And sometimes they'll ring me straight away because all my details are on there. So that's what I mean by an outreach and being able to outreach. You've got to find your data from somewhere. But then, of course, I also know that not everybody will open that email. Where they've opened it and responded, that I then can narrow down that list. So if I'm looking at 200 people, I see 160 have not opened it. So I'm able to send a second email and then a third email until eventually they open it. And that's how you can narrow that down. And then you end up talking with people that you're interested in. But it's not only about outreach, it's everybody you've ever spoken to, you've ever met. Do you grab hold of their email address? Do you seek to get that? And how do you stay in touch? And what do you stay in touch with? Andrew?
Yeah, sorry, Paul, just a quick one. Did you say that software was called Campaign Gorilla?
No, it's Lead. I think it's Lead or Leads Gorilla. I'll give you. I'll put a link in the website on the membership site. It's very useful. There's no affiliate links in there or whatever. I really would recommend it. But if you do go for it, speak to me about how you might reach out. It's actually got an inbuilt email system in it. I don't use that. I pull it into my own system because I've got control over that. But what it will do is any of those accounts, it'll pull down like that a review of their complete website and their digital presence in the form of a report. So you could always go back and say, look, I've just looked at your website. I've got a report on some of the ways you may be listing business. Would you like the report? Then you can send them the report. You can send it for yourself. Yes, Anne-Marie.
Just following on from that, sorry, does that work for B2C? Because obviously for me, so B2B is more about building referrals and referral partners. Yeah. So I would, for example, email a lot of photographers and say, I'm putting this package together. Would you be interested in coming on board or however? But that's not business to me. So I need to sort of B2C. Where do you get those from?
If you were looking for B2C, you'd be better off on social media, I think. I mean, remember, every business owner is a person. It's a C. So although we're, the people on LinkedIn and the people on a website, you're looking at them as business, but they're also people. And they may have a story in those people. So there could be an approach on that. If you've done, for instance, if you've done any work with photographers, or you've done some work with, what can we say, funeral directors. What's the funeral director's story? So if you had a particular angle, you could search out those people. So you could do that. Otherwise, I think individuals probably more on Facebook. I suppose people expect a business contact when you're in business, but let's face it. If more think about it, Anne-Marie, if you're talking about a lot of business coaches, for instance, they had a book in them that would certainly enhance their business. So you could go. It's about identifying who your audience and where they are, how you're going to catch them. So yeah, although this Leads Gorilla only works with B2B because it's searching Google. It's doing what you do. It's actually doing what you do manually if you were doing this, but doing it at a fraction of the time, very, very quickly with a lot more activity. Martin, is your hand up for a question?
Yeah, I just wondered about LinkedIn and how I know some people talk about targeting businesses or finding out more of what your target is through LinkedIn, like searching on LinkedIn. So if you have you're working with one client, that you can then search for similar clients and try and connect through LinkedIn. Is that a method?
That could be a very good method. I think you're talking about a lookalike audience, aren't you?
Yeah.
That certainly could be. I think it starts with knowing who your audience is and then searching in whatever way, looking at different ways. And the more you do it, the more you'll say, well, blimey, I could do that a little bit quicker or I could do it a bit more thoroughly, etc. I think the other thing that we need to think about is, I mean, how many people have any sort of system for staying in touch from an email point of view, besides Damien, Nick, Martin, and Anne-Marie? What do you use, Anne-Marie?
Sorry, I lost my mouse. It was all over the place. I've used the CRM that's in my Wix website at the moment, and I use Wix tasks to remind me, and then I've also got them linked into various groups and that kind of thing. But I do know that won't travel with me as the business grows, but it's kind of like my starting point.
Yeah. Martin, what do you use?
Yeah, well, I've started doing a bit of work with Nick, Nick Sladek.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he recommended this system called Neatrix. So, but I haven't actually I'm just sort of building up who I want to contact and getting my website with, sort of more direct messaging on the website, so getting things in place, but I haven't sent any emails at this point. Okay,
well, somebody else had used the system. Nick?
Yeah, I use MailerLite, which it's a nice, simple system. I think I think MailerLite looked at MailChimp and kind of took the good bits, but left a lot of the complicated stuff that maybe a lot of us don't need in MailChimp. And it's a very user-friendly system.
I love MailerLite. I have to say, you're absolutely right. And I use it for the newsletter that I do for the restaurant. Yeah. Very, very quick, very easy. Great analytics and easy to use. And it's not dissimilar to MailChimp in the way you can compose that.
It's also quicker to learn, Paul. I think sometimes with these systems, if they're too complicated, it can take you like half a year to actually work out what to do.
Yeah.
Which you don't want.
But I think for non-techie people, I think most things take a bit of time to learn. I'm going to come on to that because there's to me, there's three types of emails that people use. A lot of people will use Outlook, Apple Mail. They're the common ones, I suppose, that people will use. Gmail is probably the best of all of them. He's got lots of abilities just besides the email. You can create lists, etc. on that. Suppose you can with Outlook and Mail. But the challenge with email, it's more of a email to, an individual thing. To do anything en masse with an email is more difficult. It's not quite as easy, I don't think. The next one could be an autoresponder, and that's where somebody has given you the details on a website, and that goes into a system, and something auto-responds. You've set up a number of emails, a sequence of emails that will respond to that person. So that takes that repetitive task. Otherwise, you've got to think, how am I going to do that? So an autoresponder can be useful. And I think an autoresponder can be very useful when you're dealing just in a plain newsletter. So every month you'd want to do a newsletter so you can compose it on, and I'm talking about MailChimp, Aweber, MailerLite. There's another one there's quite a few of them that you just put your details in and then you send it out. So not only can you use it as a lead magnet, and I know Nick has done that because I gave him my details for something. And then, of course, those emails stopped. So it's about building up the sequence of that. That's where Damien's the expert at that. And of course, then you move on to something a bit more sophisticated. Although MailerLite, I believe, is quite sophisticated, you're going to move on to something like maybe Keep or Infusionsoft, etc., that is particularly sophisticated. And I think half the time I used Infusionsoft for about 7 years, and I didn't know what 2/3 of it did, but I was happy with what it did for me. But it was not an inexpensive option. You do need somebody that you're better off dealing with somebody like Damien that knows what he's doing with that. I think the other one I want to mention, though, is a CRM system. So there's a big difference. You've got an email system that will send transactional emails. You've got an autoresponder that will gather email data and you can send out a sequence. I tend to think if you're not careful, that can become impersonal. There's no personal touch there. It's automated. And yes, you can be very clever in the style of email and the way it's presented. I find text emails a lot more easier than big HTML job is. But nevertheless, it can become impersonal because you've set it to run automatically and you've forgotten it. What I think is more important that people get involved in is a CRM system, customer relationship. So your data comes in there, and if you know to manage that, you'll know who you've got as a prospect. You can set out triggers to remind you to stay in touch with people. You can send mass emails out, but also you can trigger or tag or things to keep on top of the people who are, where they are in the sales pipeline, if you like. And there you've got something like HubSpot. HubSpot, I find, is very, very good. They've got a free forever plan. And I would think if anybody's starting out, it's as good a place to start. I think Zoho, a lot of people rate Zoho. I don't. I've never got on with it. But a lot of people rate it, Zoho. And I love One CRM.
Yeah, I'm sort of embarrassed by today because I haven't really processed any of this stuff yet. I mean, not remotely. Andrew obviously is in the process of starting to build a website for me, poor man. You can see the grey hairs already. But I feel like I need to get the data. After that Mark Stoneham piece that you did, that I obviously was before I joined, I downloaded all the and exported all my LinkedIn leads, but I haven't yet done anything with them. I kind of feel like for me this is 2 months away before I'm ready for this, but I will now try and gather some more data, so I try and keep emails, but I don't know what on earth I'm going to do with them yet. I haven't got a CRM just yet.
I think you held an audience for about 3/4 of an hour of over 500 people, and there was masses. I don't know how many people commented or what data you've got from that audience.
About 100.
So you got 100 people right now that saw how good you are, but by now they'll have forgotten what you did. So
no, I appreciate that. It's a learning curve, Paul. I'm not.
It's not a criticism. It applies to everybody. Yeah. So as Damien said, to be able to follow up with that, and then maybe there's a separate skill, and there's not enough time on this call to cover the psychology of each of the calls and each of the responses, because it's about content, and it's about staying in touch and trying to build a relationship by email. The best way to build a relationship, I think, is by meeting somebody, maybe by phone for me for a Zoom call on a regular basis, but time won't permit that with 100 people.
But what you're pointing out, which is very important, is that it gets you organized and sifts to the top the things you need to do today.